Jayden Daniels has MVP potential this year, but he's not the only Commander we're excited to see take a leap in 2025. Let's talk about who's primed to break out right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Commanders, where we watch the film, break down the data, and call it like we see it. I am your host, David Harrison. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Not only am I here with you 5 days a week, but I'm also covering the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com and WUSA9.com. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view today and every day, whether you're an everydayer or just checking us out. I appreciate you. To those who are everydayers, those who come through for every show, a special thank you goes out to you. And if you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening right now. If this is your first time, thanks for finding us. Hopefully you like what you hear and you come back for more. Coming up on today's episode, we are going over OTA expectations, safety depth concerns, and whether a Terry McLaurin, Brandon Aiyuk trade would ever actually make sense. And we're starting with three players who could help shape the 2025 season: Jayden Daniels, Ben Sinnott, and Johnny Newton, because this is Mailbag Wednesday on the Locked On Commanders podcast. Insiders coming through with a whole host of questions as usual. We are not going to get to all of them, but we are going to get to a lot of them. Let's kick things off with a question a lot of insiders have been asking lately in some way, shape, or form. Which Washington Commanders players are we most excited to see develop this season? For me, it starts with three names that could quite honestly help define the team's future: Jayden Daniels, Ben Sinnott, and Johnny Newton. And I know a lot of people aren't really talking about Jayden Daniels as a quote-unquote breakout player, because obviously he had a really great season in his rookie year, but really looking for him to take that next step potentially as an MVP potential candidate. He's got the weapons now. He's got more protection now to showcase his talents even more. So while he already took a great leap into the NFL in his rookie season, certainly another step that Jayden could take. Look, Patrick Mahomes won the MVP award in his second NFL season. Lamar Jackson won the MVP award in his second NFL season. I want to see Jayden Daniels do the same. And like I said, the arrival of Deebo Samuel, the arrival of Laramie Tunsil, the arrival of Josh Connerly Jr., Jalen Lane, the return of Noah Brown, hopefully a step in development from Luke McCaffrey, Brian Robinson Jr., and the run game will hopefully get going better because of the offensive line improvements and everything else. Just everything kind of looking towards, let's see if Jayden can really take another step and get into that MVP conversation. Next up, tight end Ben Sinnott. Really feel like he's going to have a real role on the team this year. He had a role on the team last year, but a real role this team. More on him in just a little bit. Defensive tackle Johnny Newton. More time to train on his role versus being thrown in to try to fill someone else's role. Jonathan Allen's last year. When Jonathan Allen got injured, Johnny Newton was put in there. Right side defensive tackle. Typically, he was playing on the left side. That's kind of where he was rotating in until Jonathan Allen got injured, was forced in there. Not a huge difference, right? But a little bit of a different stylistic. Like he and Daron Payne, kind of similar style of players. Not carbon copies by any means, but certainly Johnny Newton is more Daron Payne stylistically than he is Jonathan Allen. And that kind of showed a little bit. I think this year we're looking for Johnny Newton to kind of combine his speed off the line, right? That's something that we talked a lot about during the season. And when we saw him get to training camp, his first handful of practices, those things like that, that was the biggest thing that really jumped off, was his ability to get off the line incredibly quick. And combine that with hopefully an offseason getting stronger. We've all been talking about, or people have been talking about Jayden Daniels and the guns, right? His biceps are looking bigger and all that stuff. But Johnny Newton also having some time, not only to work out on everything he needs to, but just get a little bit stronger, get a little bit more of an NFL shape to him. And also an offseason to get smarter, right? We talked about this in the past as well. Everydayers, you'll remember this. NFL or college players entering the NFL don't really get time to sit back and digest everything that they've been learning over the years. They go straight from their college season into bowl game preparation or into all-star game preparation, or one then the other. Then they go to scouting combine preparation. Then it's pro days. Then it's the draft. Then it's rookie camp. Like, it really all just kind of comes through a fire hose. So Johnny Newton getting that time off this offseason where he's not having to do any of that kind of stuff, hopefully, some of that fire hose drinking will turn into knowledge and make him a little bit more astute in how he uses his skills on the NFL field. And then again, if the play around him gets better, right, there are some efforts on this roster to make the pass rush better, make the run defense better. If those players are better, if those guys are doing better, then it'll allow Johnny Newton to do the same. So he's my third player that I'm kind of looking forward to seeing develop this year. Of course, before any of that development can really take shape, it all starts at OTAs. That's what's coming up this week. That's what's coming up on Wednesday. We'll be out in Ashburn for the first OTA practice open to the media. So let's talk about what fans should expect, where expectations might need a little bit of tempering. Dr. Wonderful came through and asked, what can fans expect from OTAs and what expectations need to be tempered? Well, first and foremost, everybody needs to remember OTAs are voluntary. So if someone doesn't show up for them, it isn't time to burn their jersey. I think most commanders will be on hand for the OTA for the voluntary workouts. The one that everybody's going to be wondering about is, of course, wide receiver Terry McLaurin. Left or didn't participate in the final portion of the phase 2 practices or workouts before phase 3 gets started here on Wednesday. In that case, many expectations maybe should be tempered, right? We're all going to be looking to see if he shows up. But again, we kind of went through this before when Terry's contract was expiring before all these things. Again, I told you it's a tactic, right? It's nothing too serious. Of course, it's going to get attention. I'm going to talk about it. So I'm not saying to ignore it. We're all going to talk about it. We're all going to tweet about it and all that kind of stuff. But just don't go, don't go off the edge, right? Don't even go up to the edge for this Terry McLaurin stuff, right? Now, the rest of OTAs. What is the rest of OTAs for? Well, it's the beginning portion of installation. And really, it's the beginning portion of installation for everybody, right? This first time we're going to see the rookies with the veterans. Rookies already got a little bit of installation at rookie minicamp. They're going to get a repeat of that installation plus a little bit more here in the early stages of OTAs. And this is where the team is going to start to see how much do you retain, how much do you grow through coaching, all that kind of stuff. They'll get it again at the mandatory minicamp. They'll reinstall a lot of this stuff and continue to add to it. And then they'll get it again at the start of training camp. They'll reinstall everything they've already installed, and then they'll start adding on to it again. But each time there's just a little bit more of information, a little bit more expected of these rookies and for these young guys. And for the young guys, this is where you learn. This is where you grow. We talk about development a lot. Development can happen in the season, but development isn't as much the priority in the season as it is, here's a strategy to beat our next opponent. Here's how we do that. Now, if you develop within that, fantastic. But training camp, OTAs, this is the time where players develop. This is the time where we work on your skills, work on your growth, all those kinds of things. So these young guys really need to take advantage. As I say, go earn your training camp spot, show that you're coachable, show that you're capable if you're a young player. What should fans expect? Well, you're going to read a lot about alignments. You're going to hear about Terry McLaurin. You're going to hear about rookies. You're going to hear about Jayden Daniels. You're going to hear about alignments, offensive line alignments. Who's the first 5 out there? Where is this guy lining up? Who's at guard? Who's at tackle? Who's at right guard specifically? Who's doing all these things? Defensive line, same thing. What does the defensive line formation look like? Secondary is going to get some looks, right? Is Mikey Sanders still back inside as expected? Is Trey Amos getting first team outside reps opposite of Marshawn Lattimore? Or is it Jonathan Jones? Or is it Jonathan Jones and Trey Amos and Marshawn Lattimore is not getting first team outside reps? Like, that is just going to set everybody on fire if that happens. So that's kind of some of the stuff you should expect to hear about, read about. What should you value? The good stuff. Value the good plays. If you see a tweet or you hear a show talk about, oh man, Jalen Lane, put his double move on Marshawn Lattimore, burned him up the field, caught a, perfect, beautiful over the shoulder catch from Jayden Daniels for a 60-yard gain. Boom. Take all that good from Jalen Lane. Man, release off the line, double move against a veteran corner, wins the route, takes it down, gets his break, gets his separation, finishes the play through the catch. Big time throw from Jayden Daniels. Love all that stuff. The bad stuff, discard it. If you don't want to completely discard it, just hold it. Don't go crazy, right? If Marshawn Lattimore gets beat by Jalen Lane on a double move, don't go, oh man, this is this veteran all-pro caliber cornerback getting burned by a rookie first day of OTAs. Chill on that. Take the good, discard a little bit of the bad, especially in things like 7-on-7s. Remember, there's no contact. Remember, there's no pads. Remember all of this stuff. So when you hear about a guy making a good play, appreciate it. Kind of look at the Senior Bowl, right? Take the good, the bad, understand the situation, understand the context. This is the first time this group is together. This is the first time these guys are putting together some of these ideas, some of these approaches, right? This is not the same defense they're running. This is not the same offense they're running as it was last year. If it is, that's a problem because everybody else has already seen those offenses and those defenses, right? So just take it with a grain of salt. What you shouldn't do, lock into a depth chart, right? If I tell you, or if anybody else tells you, Brandon Coleman, first team left guard, all day OTA practice number 1. Is it important? Yeah. Is it interesting? Darn tootin'. Is it the depth chart? No, not even close. So try not to get into any fantastical locked in opinion. So those are 3 players I'm watching the closest as the Commanders try to build something real upon what they built real last season. But development isn't just about talent. It's also about opportunity. With Jeremy Chin gone, there's a big one in the safety room. So let's talk about who might fill that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, just like the Commanders offseason program. And whether it's breakout players in Washington or game-changing stars on the hardwood this time of year is all about momentum. And this episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel makes it easy for you to stay in the action before tip-off and live, whether you're eyeing player props, trends, or building same-game parlays. There's no shortage of smart plays to make. Right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder are minus 420 favorites to win the NBA Finals. If you saw that coming early, you probably made a smart bet. And if you didn't, you still got time to catch the wave a little bit. I've been tracking guys who show up in the biggest moments. And if you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same-game parlay? Mix that with a live prop or 2 mid-game, and you've got a shot to turn momentum into winnings. And if you're new to FanDuel, now's the perfect time. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. With Jeremy Chin now in Las Vegas, there's a clear opening in the Commanders' safety rotation, and Dan Quinn's defense doesn't leave many roles unfulfilled for long. So who steps in? Who might that role evolve, or how might that role evolve in 2025 if there's not a clear person to step into it? That is a question brought to us by insider Hamadou, who said, I'd be interested to know about the safety room, specifically Jeremy Chin's role last year. How much does DQ really want Tyler Owens or Dominique Hampton to step up and fill that kind of role? Or will DQ change the setup a bit? Or is Will Harris a slightly undersized direct replacement in that role? So as we know, Jeremy Chin played that hybrid safety linebacker role for the Commanders last year. Some teams call it a star, some teams call it big nickel, some teams call it variation of things. And, big nickel on this team is not the same thing necessarily as a big nickel on that team in execution, right? We all expected Jeremy Chin to come back. Well, he didn't. Instead, he went to the Las Vegas Raiders. Good for him. We'll see him in week 3 against the Washington Commanders, right? Week 3, pretty sure it's week 3. The Commanders did not go out and get a body type replacement. They did not go get a Jeremy Chin physical replacement on this roster in free agency or in a priority position in the NFL draft. The closest they got is Rob McDaniel, undrafted free agent safety from Jackson State University. Unlikely that a UDFA is going to start, not impossible for sure. And as UDFAs go, Rob McDaniel, certainly one of the more intriguing ones, certainly one that we've talked about quite a bit on this show. So wouldn't necessarily be 100% surprised, still would be on the surprise meter, just not completely maxed out on the surprise meter, right? So part of the question, do I expect Joe Witt Jr., defense coordinator, and Dan Quinn, head coach, to have that position filled on the defense? If so, who is it going to be? I think Tyler Owens is probably candidate number 1 to fill that Jeremy Chin role. I think Dominique Hampton is probably candidate number 2. And really, I think they're like 1A, 1B, right? Tyler Owens obviously got more of the playing time last year, special teams. Dominique Hampton, the safety drafted out of Washington, was getting linebacker cross-training all last year. Kind of a red shirt year for him, right? You really give those skills, kind of grooming him to be that guy, so to speak. So I think it's like 1A, 1B. I think those are your 2 main competitors. And then, of course, you have Rob McDaniel, right? Will Harris, however, is the odds-on favorite to be the starting safety opposite of Quan Martin this season. And he and Quan Martin play a very similar brand of football. Now, Quan Martin is a capable box safety. He is a guy that does not mind crashing into the box, crashing the line of scrimmage, doing whatever he needs to do to help the team win. Will Harris is very much the same type of guy. Neither of them is, very big in stature. They're not the hybrid safety linebacker that you saw in Jeremy Chinn, right? So can they play somewhat stylistically? Sure. Is it going to be the exact same? It can't be. It just simply can't be. So if it's those two guys starting, then Joe Witt Jr., Dan Quinn have to change at least some of the way they operate their defense, right? So in that vein, yeah, you would expect there to be some differences, but it may also come in the use of just different personnel package, right? You might see more 3 off-ball linebackers on the field. You have Bobby Wagner, you have Frankie Louvu, and Frankie also comes off the edge sometimes, but Jordan McGee is healthy, improves his capabilities. I see him on the field with those two guys a little bit more this season. There are more than a few ways to get after filling that hole that Jeremy Chinn left, right? You could also see more 3 safety looks. Now, again, when Jeremy Chinn is in the box, usually you have Percy Butler, so you have 3 safety looks, but you might have more traditional 3 safety looks, as in Will Harris, Quan Martin, maybe Percy Butler, or, whoever that's going to be, Tyler Owens, something like that. And sometimes when Chinn blitzed last year, Wagner stayed out. Well, maybe this year you see Wagner blitz more and Will Harris stays out into the box to cover. So it might simplify things a little bit, make it easier to get a read on. But that's okay, because if you draw up a simpler plan that the offense can't block, the sack counts all the same, right? Of course, it's not just the defense that has questions to answer. On offense, one second-year player in particular could see his role grow in a big way. Let's talk about Ben Sinnott and how the Commanders might unleash him. Of course, he is one of the 3 players I'm looking forward to seeing develop this year the most. Insider Brian came through and did say, how do you think Ben Sinnott will have a bigger role this year? When we talked about the breakout candidates, we polled the media, the other beat reporters covering the Washington Commanders, and Ben Sinnott was one of the more popular names that came up as a predicted breakout player among the roster. I think Ben Sinnott's uses are endless, really, and I think that is really just a way that you're going to be able to find a role for him. He doesn't have to be your starting tight end to be on the field, right? He's a tight end. He's an H-back. He's a fullback. Move him around. Come out in 12, 13 packages. You don't usually see 12 or 13 personnel packages with a whole lot of movement. And again, 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, right? That's where the 1 and the 2 come from. 13 personnel, 1 running back, 3 tight ends, right? If it's 11 personnel, it's 1 running back, 1 tight end. If that first number is a 2. So if it's 21 personnel, 2 running backs, 1 tight end, so on and so forth. We talked about Brian Robinson being used more potentially on yesterday's episode and how that could impact his ability and his production. Well, so too could having a really good blocker in front of him. So if you have John Bates, say, for example, in line as a tight end blocking, and you have Ben Sinnott as a lead blocking fullback in front of Brian Robinson, you can probably pave some pretty good roads for Brian Robinson Jr. To run down. Zach Ertz's health is also going to be a big influencer on how much playing time Ben Sinnott gets and how much we see his role expand, but so too is his preservation, right? I think that you had a really great fortunate situation last year if you're the Commanders with Zach Ertz's health. I don't know that I would push it for another year. It's very unlikely that he's going to have as much success staying healthy as he did last year. Not impossible. So I think preservation is a big part of that. His contract is kind of a big part of that. Like how much of his earning potential is tied to incentives, because if it's tied to incentives, he's going to want to get those incentives. And if he's the best tight end in the room, he's going to say like, hey dude, like I should be on the field. I want to go get my incentives. And that's, kind of the name of the game here. Right. So if not as much of his incentive as his potential is, or his earning potential is tied to incentives, then if you need to sit him a little bit, rest him here and there, give Ben Sinnott more snaps, things like that, he's less likely to take that a certain kind of way when that situation arrives. So again, a lot of things you could do there with Ben Sinnott to get him more involved this season. So between evolving the safety room and the versatility of Ben Sinnott bringing that he brings to the offense, rather, the Commanders have some key pieces in place. But the question now is, will the fans show up even more than they did last year to match that energy? Let's talk about home field advantage at Northwest Stadium and whether Washington can fully reclaim it in 2025. That coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Over the past decade, going to Commanders home games has too often felt like walking into enemy territory. That is what insider Michael brings up as we wrap up this mailbag. That started to shift last week with new ownership, new direction, team giving fans a reason to believe. Again, the question now is, can Northwest Stadium finally become a true home field advantage in 2025? And Michael wants to know, what are some of the things that ownership is doing to help drive attendance at home and things like that? And does the significant increase in home fans at games really make a difference? So I think the first thing to talk about, there's definitely more of a home game feel at Northwest Stadium last year than in any other year I've covered this team, which again, I'm only going into my 4th year here covering this team, so take it with a grain of salt. But I have a feeling that insiders like Michael have been cheering for this team a little bit longer, at least, than I've been covering them, right? But yeah, last year, man, home fans showed up. Again, that's always going to be a little bit of a contest there, right? Because DC is a transplant city. We all know this, or town. We all know this. So many other fan bases are represented really well in this region, and so many other fan bases travel really well. And so when all those things combined, I think you're kind of always naturally going to have a little bit of an away fan base presence in the stadium, especially some of the key rivalries, right? Philly's only 3 hours up the road. Honestly, the Giants are only 4 hours up the road. So if the Giants ever get really good, that's not that long of a drive to make if you're a Giants fan. Cowboys fans, first of all, there's a lot of them living in DC because it's a transplant town, but then they travel really well. So I think some of that just kind of comes with the territory. I don't think that's Washington specific. I think teams with really good home attendance, records probably still face some of those with some of those fan bases. But Josh Harris and the ownership group have been putting a lot of effort into things, into the stadium, trying to make things more enjoyable for the fans from the top down. The suites are more comfortable. They're catered better. Concessions are improved both in quality of food and in the efficiency that you get in and get out of line, get back to your seat. Presentation efforts have been made. Just efforts to get you into the stadium faster have been made. And of course, the team is winning, right? So that's kind of ultimately the number one thing. Like I used to tell Buccaneers fans when I cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers all the time, read your ticket. Nothing guarantees, it doesn't guarantee a win. It guarantees that you get to attend the game. The win is a bonus. Well, the team is giving out a lot of bonuses this year or in 2024. With these primetime games coming up and even like late afternoon games that are going to go into the sundown hours, I expect to see a little bit more in presentation. The Commanders did make some efforts there last year. There was one game specifically where they did kind of this like lights out moment and all that stuff. They warned us about it or like let us know that it was coming. They didn't really let everybody else know it was coming. So when the lights went down, the fans kind of didn't really know what was going on or what to do. And so it was kind of weird, but I think the more it happens and the more opportunities it has to happen, I think the more it'll just kind of become a known thing there. So I think the ownership group is doing a good job. Again, turning a lemon into lemonade, so to speak. My first couple seasons covering the team, there's very little relatively happening in the fan areas pregame. But last year, it was like every week there was a different reason for fans to get into the stadium as early as possible, be around, go to the different areas of the stadium and just be entertained, right? And I thought that was really cool. And of course, more fans coming to home games, it does help. Some players will say that it helps or affects the game more than others. But at the end of the day, if you can make it harder for the opposing offense to communicate, you're going to give your defense an advantage, period. If you create one false start, that could lead to a punt. It could lead to a longer down and distance that leads to an interception. It could lead to a botched snap that's a fumble turnover. Like, you can help impact the game. So absolutely, Washington Commanders fans, I hope to see you in droves out Northwest Stadium this year, starting with New York Giants week 1. I know it's not going to be like the sexiest matchup in the world, but that's a division game, man. That's an important first week win of the season. So I want to make sure that Jackson Dart, whether he's starting or not, I want Jackson Dart to walk out of that stadium going, guys, I thought you said Washington fans weren't all that passionate about their team. I want Jackson Dart to walk out with a completely new impression Washington Commanders fans. And speaking of fan reactions, nothing would shake up this fan base more than a blockbuster trade involving Terry McLaurin. So let's get into it. Is there any world where a trade for Brandon Aiyuk actually makes sense? Insider Merle, and he kind of knew he was poking the bear a little bit asking this question, guys. If Terry holds out for a long period of time, is there any possibility of him getting traded for Brandon Aiyuk? I know he's hurt. Brandon Aiyuk is hurt, but it's Jayden's best friend. And from what I'm hearing, Niners ownership never wanted to pay him. He's 26 and under contract for 3 years. Yeah, if you go back to last year, that Brandon Aiyuk contract situation was definitely one to watch. Hypothetically, if Terry McLaurin holds out, which, guys, listen, again, as of right now, Terry McLaurin is not a holdout. If he misses anything voluntary, it's not holding out. They're voluntary. Don't have to be there. If Terry McLaurin holds out, and he holds out for a good period of time, hypothetically, could he be traded for Brandon Aiyuk? No. Given that it's a never say never world, still no. If you were ever going to say never, this would be never. Jayden Daniels, Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, Terry McLaurin. You can add Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil to that list because they were just acquired this offseason. But I don't see any of those guys. Like in any scenario, I would be floored if a trade happened. Now, I don't hate the idea of trading for Brandon Aiyuk, though. So I actually brought this up last season. Everyday host, you remember that. And I stood by it all the way up to the moment that he signed his extension with the 49ers. I think we're on a collision course for running back Rachaad White to leave Tampa Bay next offseason and come to Washington. So why not reunite the Sun Devil triad and get Brandon Aiyuk here? I'm wearing an Arizona State Walter Cronkite sweatshirt as we're recording this episode. I am a Sun Devil alum. Why not bring the three back together? You know, they wore maroon in college, wear burgundy in the NFL. But the Brandon Aiyuk part of it is the more complicated part of it. Brandon Aiyuk accounts for $9.9 million against the 49ers cap this year and has a dead salary cap number of $65.2 million. That's hard to move, man. If the 49ers trade him before June 1st, they lose $25 million on salary cap this year. If they trade him after June 1st, they actually save $1.57 million according to Spot Track, but they incur a $29.585 million dead cap figure in 2026, literally kicking a big old can down the road. Of course, the Commanders could take some of the money from the 49ers contracts off their books. So, you know, how about a trade like this? Brandon Aiyuk and his contract plus a 2026 fifth round pick for a 2026 seventh round pick from the Washington Commanders. Like, basically, the 49ers have to essentially pay the Commanders to take Aiyuk off their hands. As is, if the Commanders trade for Aiyuk, don't take any of his money, all that stuff, they'd add $1.578 million to their current salary cap. That's too easy, but the rest of it is prohibitive for the 49ers. Brandon Aiyuk's injury story, tore his ACL and his MCL in late October. So if you're looking at the late July return as the earliest possible return date, but given that he suffered two tears, not just the one, I think you're closer to that 12-month window, if not longer. So you're looking at like end of October, early November, you know what I mean? Honestly. And even then the first year, every receiver that's ever torn their ACL will tell you that first year, you still don't really feel all the way right. Even if the 49ers trade Brandon Aiyuk next offseason, they still lose $14 million in cap space. If they trade him post June 1st of 2026, they save $7 million in 2026 and they lose $21 million in 2027. So you're in a less terrible contract situation if you're the 49ers, still not a good one. So the built-in out for San Francisco and Aiyuk's deal is actually in the 2027 offseason when they can move on from him and save about $20 million no matter when they move him. So ultimately, don't see it happening. But whether it's young talent stepping up, roles still waiting to be filled, or wild trade hypotheticals that get the fan base buzzing, one thing is clear. The Commanders are entering a new phase, and it's going to take everyone on the field and in the stands to make it count. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Coming up next on Locked On Commanders, we'll have notes, analysis, and all the buzz coming from the beginning of OTAs Wednesday afternoon in Ashburn, Virginia. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, you can text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your second listen today, check out Locked On NFL Scouting with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino. As training camps get closer and roster moves keep coming, they'll help you stay the most informed NFL fans around. You can find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you're getting this podcast. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day. To all the everydayers, I see you, and I appreciate you. Until next time, stay safe, be good to each other. We'll talk again soon, right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.